The rain hadn't let up in hours. It fell in steady, soaking sheets that turned the streets of Manhattan into shallow rivers. Amelia's sneakers were soaked through, squelching with each step as she pushed through the wind toward the towering glass front of the high-rise. The delivery bag over her shoulder dripped, and the food container inside had already started to steam from the contrast of heat and cold. She was freezing, drenched to the bone, and this was her last order of the night. All she wanted was to drop it off and disappear. The doorman didn't say anything as she walked in, just looked at her with the kind of glance that said she didn't belong. But her name was on the list, and the order came with direct instructions. Deliver to the top floor, use the private elevator, no questions, no contact. She stepped into the polished metal box of the elevator, watching herself in the reflection of its brushed gold walls. Her hoodie clung to her arms, her leggings stuck to her skin, and her tank top was soaked all the way through. She looked like a mess. By the time she reached the penthouse floor, everything around her whispered wealth. The air smelled like clean linen and subtle cologne. The floor was marble. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, framing a rain-soaked skyline. It felt like stepping into another world. She didn't see anyone, just silence. She walked past the grand piano and into the open kitchen area, setting the delivery bag down gently on the black granite counter, careful not to drip too much water. Her fingers trembled as she pulled the wet hoodie off. She glanced around quickly. The instructions hadn't said anyone would be home. The lights were low. The space was quiet. Maybe the owner wasn't in. Maybe they had staff to clean this all up. Her tank top stuck to her body uncomfortably, and the heat of the apartment made the wet fabric feel worse against her skin. She spotted what looked like a guest bathroom down the hallway. Just a quick second to dry off. That was all. She wasn't stealing anything. She wasn't even exploring. She just needed a damn towel. The bathroom was elegant in that way expensive things are, understated and spotless. A towel warmer glowed quietly near the door. She peeled off her tank top and wrung it out, then unclipped her bra. Her skin prickled from the sudden warmth of the room. She grabbed one of the plush white towels and wrapped it around herself, breathing in the scent of something expensive and clean. She leaned over the counter, letting her forehead rest against the mirror, trying to calm her heartbeat. Then a voice cut through the silence. Low, calm, male. I see the food made it up. Her entire body went stiff. She turned slowly, towel clutched tightly at her chest. He was standing in the doorway. Tall, clean-shaven, rolled sleeves and an open collar. His hair was slightly tousled, like he'd run his hand through it in frustration. She recognized the face from tabloids, from headlines. Billionaire, CEO, off-limits, dangerous, domin something. Her voice cracked as she spoke. I'm sorry. I didn't think anyone was home. I only needed to dry off. He held her gaze, unreadable. Then, without a word, he stepped forward, pulled another towel from the warmer, and offered it to her. She didn't move, couldn't. You'll get sick if you stay like that, he said, his tone almost indifferent. She took the towel, hands trembling. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I should go, she whispered. You should finish drying off first, he said. Why? He met her eyes. Because I don't like seeing someone shiver unless I'm the one making them. Then he turned and walked away, leaving her standing barefoot in his guest bathroom, wet, exposed, and unsure if she had just stepped into a mistake or the beginning of something dangerous. Amelia Carter had never belonged to places like this. Raised in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens with a mother who worked 2 shifts and a younger brother who barely kept himself out of trouble, her life had always been about survival. Dreams were a luxury she couldn't afford. She worked as a food delivery girl not because she loved the job, but because it was the only thing flexible enough to work around her classes at the community college and still let her bring home enough money to help with the bills. Most nights she came home sore, exhausted, and invisible. That was safe. She knew how to be invisible. She didn't know how to be seen, especially not by someone like Daman Rourke. He wasn't just rich. He was the kind of rich that didn't make sense. The kind of rich that didn't just buy things, but changed cities. CEO of Rourke Tech, one of the biggest private innovation firms in the country, Daman had been featured in Forbes before he turned 30. He rarely spoke to the media. He didn't date publicly. No scandals, no slip-ups, no signs of softness. The world saw him as a myth, a machine, efficient, ruthless, and terrifyingly precise. And yet the man who offered her a towel had been quiet, unbothered, not angry, not arrogant, just watching. She had expected yelling, accusations, security. Instead, she got heat in his voice and a look in his eyes that made her skin flush hotter than the towel wrapped around her. She'd left the bathroom that night as quickly as she could, her damp clothes in a tight roll beneath her arm, heart thundering as she walked past him without a word. He didn't stop her, but he watched, and she felt it, felt him. Like gravity itself had shifted in that penthouse, and now she was walking around with its pull still wrapped around her chest. She told herself it was over, a weird, humiliating blip in an otherwise forgettable week. But the next night she got a notification, same building, same floor, another delivery. Her stomach twisted. She should have rejected it, should have passed it on to another driver, but she didn't. She put on her driest hoodie, tied her hair back, and rode the elevator again. This time when the doors opened, he was already waiting. "You're late," he said, not looking up from the tablet in his hand. Her voice was steady. "The rain." He nodded once. "Leave the food on the table." She hesitated, then stepped in. The room felt different, dimmer, softer, like it remembered her too. As she placed the bag down, she heard him speak again. "You dried off this time." She didn't answer. She didn't know how. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, "What's your name?" She blinked. "You don't need to know my name. I'm just the delivery girl." He finally looked up. "I'm not asking because I need to. I'm asking because I want to." Her heart did something strange in her chest. She didn't give it to him that night, but she came back again. And again. Over the next week, she delivered to the penthouse 5 times. Every time she swore it was the last. Every time she found herself standing in front of his door again. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't. But each time, the air between them thickened, charged with something neither of them acknowledged. She learned that Daman didn't talk to anyone unless he had to, that his staff communicated through assistants, that he worked late, stayed late, existed in a world most people only saw through headlines and tinted windows. But when she was there, something in him shifted. He asked questions about her classes, her family, her favorite book. Once he offered her coffee. She declined. Her hands were shaking. There was no flirting, no touching, but it felt like standing too close to a fire. She didn't want it. Not really. But she also didn't want to walk away. The last night of the week, the rain was worse than ever. Her scooter hydroplaned on Fifth Avenue, and she arrived at the building with soaked jeans, a bruised hip, and a bag of food that barely stayed warm. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. When she stepped into the penthouse, she saw him, already at the dining table, sleeves rolled up, shirt unbuttoned at the throat. He stood when he saw her limp. What happened? She waved it off. Nothing serious, just slippery roads and bad brakes. He didn't smile. He walked toward her, took the bag, and set it aside. Then he said, "Take off your shoes. You're dripping." She hesitated. "It's fine. I have floors that cost more than your scooter. Take them off." His voice wasn't cruel, just firm. She obeyed, feeling stupid and wet and painfully aware of every drop sliding down her skin. He disappeared into another room and returned a moment later with a towel, again. Only this time, when she reached for it, he didn't let go immediately. His hand brushed hers, warm, intentional. She looked up. "You don't belong in this storm," he said softly. "Then why do I keep showing up in it?" she asked, hating the shake in her voice. He didn't answer, just lifted the towel and began drying her arm slowly, reverently, like it mattered. And in that moment, something between them cracked open. Amelia Carter, the invisible girl from Queens, had no idea what game she'd just stepped into. And Damon Rourke, the billionaire who never let anyone close, was about to discover that some storms didn't knock, they soaked their way in. She told herself not to come back. Told herself that what happened in that penthouse, in the slow pass of a towel across her skin, and the silence that followed, was a mistake, dangerous, unprofessional. She wasn't that kind of girl, and he wasn't the kind of man who noticed women like her, unless he was bored. But boredom didn't look the way Damon Rourke looked at her. It didn't follow her out of the building. It didn't burn under her skin hours later when she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every breath, every word, every second. She skipped the next delivery, let another driver take it, but then a note appeared in her delivery app. Client request, specific name, her name. Refusal flagged. She should have reported it. Instead, she went. When the doors opened this time, she didn't step in hesitantly. She walked into the room like she had stopped pretending. And this time, he didn't stay by the window. He met her halfway. "You ignored the last delivery," he said. "I'm not on your payroll," she replied. He studied her, something unreadable in his eyes. Then he turned and said, "I made you coffee." She followed him into the kitchen like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like she hadn't come here soaking wet and wrapped in borrowed warmth less than a week ago. The cups were already set out, steam curling gently from each. She took the one he handed her and held it, both hands wrapped around the ceramic. "Why are you doing this?" she asked finally. "You don't know me." He leaned against the counter, sleeves rolled again, tie abandoned somewhere. "Maybe that's the point. Everyone else I know has a reason to be here. You don't." "That's not enough," she said. "Then maybe I'm just selfish." She didn't speak. He took a sip, set the cup down, and said, "You remind me of something I forgot I wanted." The air thickened. Her voice came out lower. "And what's that?" "Real." After that night, it wasn't about deliveries anymore. He texted her, not often, just enough, just little things. "Do you prefer black coffee or sugar? Do you read before bed? Do you like storms or silence?" At first she didn't respond, but eventually she did. One-word answers that turned into full sentences. Sentences that turned into hours of conversations they never planned to have. And slowly, she realized he wasn't trying to impress her. He was just being. The man everyone called a machine had a quiet to him that wasn't cold, just careful. A silence that wasn't dismissive, just tired. And the more she spoke, the more he listened. Not with the intent to reply, with the intent to understand. And that changed everything. One night, she arrived before he texted. She didn't have a reason. She just came. He opened the door like he'd been waiting. "You're early," he said. "You're surprised?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, just glad." He let her in. No questions, no explanations, just space. The room was dim, lights low, the skyline glowing through the massive windows. She stood near the edge, arms crossed, watching the city. He joined her silently. After a long moment, she said, "I don't understand you. I don't expect you to. Then what do you want?" He didn't answer at first. Then he turned toward her, eyes steady. "To see what happens when you stop holding yourself so tightly." She didn't breathe. Couldn't. And then he did something unexpected. He reached out, not to touch, not to pull, just to lift a strand of hair from her face, gently tucking it behind her ear. It wasn't sexual. It was reverent, and it undid her. "You don't know where I've been," she whispered. "I don't care," he said. "You're here now." And in that moment she realized something dangerous. She wanted to be. Their pattern wasn't simple. It wasn't dates or dinners or declarations. It was presence. He worked. She read. They didn't speak unless they meant it. Sometimes she'd come in and sit on his couch with a mug of tea he made without asking. Sometimes she brought takeout and ate beside him while he reviewed contracts. Once, she fell asleep on his couch. When she woke up, a blanket was over her, the lights dimmed, and he was seated in the chair beside her, watching her breathe like she was the only thing in the room that moved. Still, no lines were crossed, no hands wandered, but the tension lived in every look, in every almost, until the night that wasn't almost. She arrived in the middle of a storm, again, drenched, again. He opened the door and froze. She was soaked through, hoodie clinging to her arms, hair stuck to her cheeks. She stepped in without a word, kicking off her shoes, eyes on his. "I'm not here to deliver anything tonight," she said. "I know," he replied. "I'm not here to talk either." "Then what are you here for?" he asked, voice low. She swallowed. "To stop pretending this isn't happening." He took a step closer, then another. His hand reached up slowly, fingers brushing her jaw, sliding wet strands behind her ear. "If I touch you now," he whispered, "I won't stop." "Then don't." He didn't move for a second, just looked at her, really looked. And then he kissed her. It wasn't slow, it wasn't rushed. It was everything held back, now let loose. Her hands gripped his shirt, his mouth devoured hers. When he pulled back, breath ragged, he whispered against her lips, "Tell me if you want me to stop." She shook her head. "No, I want you to see me." He stepped back slightly, eyes scanning her soaked clothes. "Then take them off," he said quietly. Not a demand, a request, a permission. And she did, slowly, carefully, like every layer peeled back wasn't just fabric, but history, pain, fear. And when she stood there in nothing but her skin, he didn't touch her. He looked at her like she was art, a moment, a sunrise he didn't expect. And then he said, "You're beautiful." She laughed once, breathless. "You say that like I'm not broken." "We're all broken," he replied, "but you're the only person I've ever seen who still shines through the cracks." And when he wrapped that same towel around her again, it wasn't about drying her. It was about holding her together. After that night, she told herself she wouldn't return. She told herself that what happened between them was a lapse, a moment born of weather and heat, and months of want she hadn't admitted until it was already too late. But the towel he wrapped around her still smelled like his cologne 3 days later, and the bruised softness of his fingers on her skin kept replaying every time she tried to sleep. She had been naked in front of a man before, but never like that. Never while being looked at, as if she was the answer to a question he didn't know he was asking. It wasn't about sex. It was about being seen, and that terrified her more than anything else ever had. But she came back. Of course she did, not because he called her. He didn't. Not because he begged. He wouldn't. She came back because she couldn't stay away. When she walked into the penthouse that time, he wasn't in a suit. He was barefoot, wearing a soft black t-shirt and gray sweatpants, seated at the edge of the couch with a book in his hand, and the city spread like a dream behind him. He looked up, his eyes unreadable but warm, and said nothing at first. She stood in silence, unsure how to cross the space between them. Then he said quietly, "Did you sleep?" She shook her head. "Me neither," he said. She moved to sit beside him, not touching, but closer than before. "I shouldn't have let that happen," she whispered. He looked at her. "You think I regret it?" She didn't answer. I don't, he said. But I regret that you looked scared after. Not of me, of yourself. She turned to him slowly. Because I don't know who I am when I stop hiding. He tilted his head slightly. Then maybe we find out together. She stared at him, heart thudding, then asked, Why me? His jaw flexed slightly, then relaxed. Because you showed up in my world and refused to be impressed by it. You didn't shrink, you didn't chase, you just were. And that's rare. She nodded slowly. And what happens when I stop being rare? Then I'll remind you, he said softly, of the first time I saw you, dripping wet, shivering, and trying so hard not to let me see how much you needed someone to wrap you in something warm. That night, they didn't touch. Not really, but they didn't separate either. She fell asleep on his couch again, this time with her head resting against his shoulder, and he didn't move for hours. When she woke up, the blanket had slipped, and his arm was around her waist like a promise made in silence. She didn't leave. She stayed for breakfast. She stayed while he worked in the other room. She read one of his books, curled on the lounge chair, and when he came to check on her, he said nothing, just leaned down and kissed the top of her head like it was the most natural thing he'd ever done. By the end of the week, she had her own mug in his kitchen, a folded blanket on his couch, a toothbrush tucked quietly beside his. Still, nothing was said, no labels, no declarations. But something had shifted. They didn't just orbit anymore. They moved together. And then came the evening she found him staring out the window, glass untouched in his hand, expression blank. "Talk to me," she said softly. He didn't answer. "Daman," she said, stepping closer, "please." He looked at her finally, eyes tired. "I had a brother," he said. She froze. "Had?" He nodded slowly. "Older, smarter, the kind of person people followed without question. He died when I was 23. Motorcycle accident. I didn't go to the funeral. I didn't speak for a week. After that, I built walls. I stopped needing people. I became the man everyone thought could never break. Because if I broke, I wouldn't know how to put myself back together." She moved toward him slowly, gently taking the glass from his hand and setting it aside. "You don't have to fix yourself with me," she said. "I'm not here to watch you shatter. I'm here to hold the pieces." He exhaled, and it sounded like surrender. And then he reached for her, arms sliding around her waist, pulling her into him like she was the anchor keeping him from drifting out to sea. She held him there, heart to heart, silence humming like safety. Later, they sat side by side on the floor, backs against the couch, knees brushing, her hand tucked into his. "I used to think being touched meant being taken," she said suddenly, "that the only reason anyone wanted me was for what I could give, not for who I was." He turned his head toward her. "Who told you that?" "No one had to," she said. "Life did. Every time I was looked at like a thing. Every time a man assumed the price of my body was a smile and a thank you. Every time I said no, and it wasn't heard." He closed his eyes. "I'm listening now." "I know," she whispered. "That's why I'm still here." That night she undressed again, not because she was soaked, not because she needed to dry off, but because she wanted him to see her by choice. Every layer she removed, she did slowly, deliberately, with eyes on his. And when she stood bare before him, she didn't feel small. She felt seen, revered, wanted, not as a fantasy, as a truth. He stepped toward her, hands warm, sliding over her shoulders, down her arms, eyes never leaving hers. And when he touched her, it wasn't urgent, it wasn't rough, it was worship. His mouth traced the curve of her collarbone, his hands moved like they were memorizing her shape. He kissed the scar on her thigh, like it was a secret worth keeping. She gasped when he sank to his knees in front of her, not because she was afraid, but because no one had ever knelt before her like she mattered. "You're trembling," he whispered. I'm not scared, she said. Then what is it? I've never been loved like this. He looked up at her, eyes burning. Neither have I. That night, they didn't sleep apart. They didn't sleep much at all. But what they shared wasn't about climax. It was about connection, skin against skin, heart against heart, the kind of intimacy that left fingerprints on the soul. And when they finally collapsed in tangled sheets, limbs entwined, breaths shared, she whispered, "You don't have to protect me." "I'm not," he murmured. "I'm letting you in." She smiled into his chest, heartful. "Then don't lock the door behind me." He kissed her hair. "I never will." The mornings began to feel like rhythm. She would wake before him, stretch slowly in the soft light that filtered through the glass walls, wrap herself in his oversized shirt, and pad barefoot to the kitchen where she would make coffee. She still wasn't sure he liked the way she made, but he drank it anyway. He never said thank you, not aloud, but the way he watched her, as she moved, the unspoken gravity in his gaze said more than words ever could. He had stopped asking why she stayed. She had stopped pretending she wasn't terrified of what it meant to be this close to someone who could break her open without even touching her. But the fear wasn't enough to stop her anymore. It wasn't enough to make her run. Not yet. Not until the outside world caught up to them. It started with a text, a photo, a blurry image of her exiting a black SUV outside the penthouse at dawn, hair wild, legs bare, his shirt half tucked into the waistband of her shorts. She stared at it on her phone, stomach clenching. There was no caption. There didn't need to be. The image said everything. By noon, it was on a blog. By 3, the office was whispering. By 5, there was a memo from HR asking for a confidential conversation. She didn't bring it up to him at first. She thought maybe if she didn't speak it, it would fade. But it didn't. It got louder. The headlines grew crueler. Billionaire caught sleeping with hired help. Delivery girl wraps more than just packages. She couldn't even look at her own reflection without hearing the echo of their judgment. So when she finally walked into his office, shut the door behind her and said, "We have a problem," he already knew. He didn't say anything at first, just looked up, eyes unreadable, mouth tight. She held up the printed screenshots. "They know," she said. "Everyone knows." He stood slowly. "And what exactly do they think they know?" She exhaled. "That I'm sleeping with you, that I used you, that this whole thing was manipulation, some stupid Cinderella fantasy where the girl from the wrong side of the service elevator gets her hands on the man in the penthouse." He moved toward her. "You didn't use me." "It doesn't matter," she snapped, "because that's the story now, and we both know what happens to girls in stories like this. We disappear." His voice softened. "You're not disappearing." "Then do something," she said. "Say something. Show them it's not a game." He looked at her, long and slow. "Are you asking me to go public?" "I'm asking you to stop hiding behind silence." He didn't answer, not with words. Instead, he walked around his desk, picked up his phone, and made a call. "This is Damen Cross," he said into the receiver. "Schedule a press briefing, tomorrow, 8 a.m., no script, no filters." Then he hung up. She stared at him. "You'd really do that?" He met her gaze. "You're not my secret. You're the first thing in my life I've wanted to claim without apology." And that's when she realized what scared her most. It wasn't the press. It wasn't the backlash. It was the possibility that he meant it. That he would stand in front of the world and say her name like it mattered. That night, they didn't speak much. He poured wine. She watched him from the couch, bare legs tucked under her, mind spinning. When he sat beside her, he didn't reach for her body. He reached for her hand. "If this ends badly," she whispered, "I want you to know I never came here looking for you." Not like this. He squeezed her fingers gently. And I never looked at you and saw anything less than mine. The next morning, the room was packed. Cameras, reporters, flashes. He stood in front of them like a man who had spent his whole life commanding rooms. But when he opened his mouth, his voice was different. Softer. Raw. "There's been a lot of noise this week," he began. "Speculation. Accusation. Most of it is wrong, but some of it is true. I have been spending time with a woman who entered my life unexpectedly. She didn't come with titles. She didn't come with connections. She came with truth, and I'd rather burn my reputation than let that truth be twisted by anyone else." Gasps, clicks, whispers, and then he said her name, clearly, without hesitation. And the world shifted. He didn't say he loved her. He didn't have to. She was watching from the hallway, heart in her throat, hands trembling. When he stepped off the podium, the first place he went was to her. The cameras didn't follow. He didn't let them. He kissed her in the elevator, not like a performance, but like a promise. "You didn't have to do that," she said against his mouth. "I did," he murmured, "because you undressed more than just my body. You stripped the part of me that thought vulnerability was weakness." She pulled back just slightly, eyes glistening. "So what happens now?" He smiled, slow and dangerous. "Now, the real game begins." They didn't go home that night. Not to the penthouse, not to the city. He booked a private car that took them to the coast, to a house she hadn't known he owned, a place hidden by cliffs and silence, where the ocean met the edge of the world and nobody asked questions. She didn't need to pack. He didn't ask her to. He just said, "Come with me." And she did. For 3 days they didn't look at headlines. They didn't check emails. They stayed wrapped in salt air and linen sheets, in whispered conversations, and bodies too tangled to pull apart. He watched her sketch beside the window, with her knees tucked to her chest. She watched him forget how to be a man who built walls for a living. They cooked without recipes. They kissed without hesitation. They slept like they hadn't in years. And in those quiet hours between sunset and sleep, she started to believe maybe they'd found a way to outrun the noise. But peace is always temporary when you come from a world that feeds on chaos. On the 4th morning, he got a call. He didn't answer at first. She watched him stare at the screen, thumb hovering, jaw tight. Then he stood up, walked outside, and didn't come back in for an hour. When he did, his face had changed. She sat up slowly. "What is it?" He didn't answer right away. Then he exhaled. "Someone leaked your employment file, the original delivery application, the security cam footage from the first night." Her stomach dropped. "Who?" "We don't know yet, but it's everywhere." She stood, heart pounding. "What does that mean?" "It means the story just got new teeth. They're painting it as a calculated move, a social climb, a seduction strategy. They're quoting your old boss, your rent history, even pulling photos from your high school yearbook." She backed away. "They think I planned this?" "They want to." He stepped closer. "Because it's easier to believe you were after power than to admit you just mattered." Her voice cracked. "I can't fight that." "You don't have to, Wakey." He said, I will." "No," she said suddenly, louder than she meant to. "You can't protect me from something you helped create." He froze. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" she said, chest rising fast. "You brought me into your world without asking what it would cost me. You opened the door but didn't stay to hold it when the wind knocked me off my feet." "I'm still here," he said. "I didn't run." "But you didn't ask either," she whispered. "Not when," they whispered. "Not when they looked at me like I was a mistake you made. You just assumed I'd be strong enough to carry it." His voice dropped. "You are strong." "That's not the point," she said, shaking her head. "I don't want to survive you. I want to belong with you. And right now, I don't. He looked at her, face unreadable. Then what are you saying? She looked down. I need space, not because I don't want this, but because I don't know who I am inside your world anymore. Silence thickened between them. And if you leave, he said quietly, if I leave and you still want me when the noise dies down, maybe we try again. Maybe? He asked, voice breaking just slightly. I'm not good with maybes. Neither am I, she said, but it's the only honest thing I can offer right now. She left that afternoon, didn't pack much, just the sketch pad she'd been filling since the day he gave her the towel, and the memory of his mouth on her skin like a prayer. He didn't stop her, he just stood at the edge of the doorway and whispered, if this is what you need, I'll wait. She didn't turn back. Couldn't. Because if she looked at him one more time, she'd never go. The next days passed in a blur. She stayed at a friend's loft downtown, changed her number, disconnected everything that had tied her to his world. She watched herself trend and burn online, her face cut into pieces and pasted into headlines she never asked to be part of. She stopped answering calls, stopped opening emails. She barely left the apartment, but she drew. She filled page after page with the curve of his jaw, the hollow of his throat, the moment he looked at her like she was sunlight. And then one night, when the city was rain-drenched and the sirens outside blurred into silence, she opened her inbox to find one email. No subject line, no body text, just an image, a scanned page from one of her sketches, the one of her sitting curled in a chair the night after she told him she was afraid of disappearing. At the bottom of the image, he had written 4 words in black ink. I still see you. She stared at it for a long time. Then she cried for the first time since she left. She didn't answer the email, not at first. She read it, closed it, opened it again, then sat staring at the screen while the night dragged itself into morning. There was nothing else. No questions, no demands. Just that one sketch, that one line, written like a promise. She still remembered the way he had looked at her the night they met, half amused, half intrigued, like she was a puzzle he didn't expect to solve. And somehow, even now, after everything, he still looked at her like she was worth understanding. 3 days later, she stood outside the same building where everything had started. She didn't tell him she was coming. She didn't wear makeup or heels or anything expensive. She wore jeans, a plain sweater, and the same delivery bag she had kept in her closet, like a reminder of where she came from. The security guard didn't stop her. The elevator ride felt endless. Her reflection in the chrome walls was older now, not in years, but in experience, in the quiet heaviness that came with surviving your own story. When the doors opened, the floor was quiet. His office lights were on. She stepped inside without knocking. He was seated at his desk, fingers paused above his keyboard, like he'd been expecting her for days. Their eyes met. Neither of them spoke. Not yet. Then he stood slowly, as if afraid that even the smallest movement might scare her away again. She didn't move. I thought maybe, he started, then stopped. She shook her head. Don't talk yet. She walked toward him slowly, heart pounding, until she stood close enough to feel the heat of his breath. That email, she said quietly. That line you wrote. I didn't know how much I needed to hear it until I did. He swallowed. I didn't know how to say anything else. You didn't have to, she said. You just had to show up. I was scared, he admitted. Not of the press, not of the fallout, of you, of what I felt, of how easy it was to want you and how impossible it felt to deserve you. She reached for his hand. You still don't understand, do you? You were never supposed to deserve me. You were supposed to choose me anyway. His fingers tightened around hers. I do. She smiled, small and aching. Then we start from here. Not as your assistant, not as your escape, just as a woman who took her shirt off to dry and accidentally found something worth staying for. He smiled back, finally, the kind of smile that didn't belong to a CEO or a billionaire, just a man who had lost something and gotten it back without even knowing how. She stepped closer, pressed her forehead to his. "No more running," she whispered. "No more hiding," he replied. And when he kissed her, it wasn't about lust or power or fixing something broken. It was about breathing, about coming home, about finally being seen, not as a mistake, not as a rumor, but as something real. They didn't need to say anything else, not then, because the world outside would keep spinning, the headlines would fade, and the tower would still stand. But this moment, this quiet, steady, undeniable truth between them, this was theirs, and it was enough.
Sophia Bennett never imagined she would become the wife of a billionaire. But when life pushed her into a corner, she had no other choice. Her family was drowning in debt. The hospital kept calling with grim updates on her mother's condition. She needed money, an amount she could never earn in a lifetime. Then Alexander Grayson appeared, a ruthless, cold, and powerful CEO. He didn't believe in love, nor did he need a real wife. What he needed was the perfect image to protect his empire from malicious rumors. And Sophia was the perfect candidate. "This marriage is just a contract." Alexander's voice was devoid of emotion. No love, no attachments, just a mutually beneficial arrangement. Sophia knew she was selling her freedom, but as she signed her name on the contract, she had no idea that this very moment would change her life forever. Sophia Bennett and Alexander Grayson's wedding was the epitome of luxury, draped in flashing lights and hollow congratulations. The most powerful figures in the business world attended, eager to witness the perfect union between two complete strangers. Sophia wore a breathtaking wedding gown, her lips curved into a flawless smile. But inside, she felt empty. Alexander stood beside her, the picture of elegance, yet his gaze remained cold and distant. When the ceremony ended, his hand rested lightly on her waist, a gesture that appeared intimate but carried no warmth. When the doors of the Grayson estate closed behind them, sealing them away from the cameras and prying eyes, the air turned suffocatingly cold. No more congratulations, no more forced smiles, just silence. A vast, unspoken distance between two strangers. "Your room is down the hall," Alexander said, removing his jacket and draping it over a chair. "We'll live under the same roof, but I don't expect anything beyond what we agreed upon." Sophia nodded, masking the strange flicker of disappointment in her chest. She had known this from the start. This was just a contract, no feelings, no attachments. But why did her heart feel so heavy? The days that followed were filled with distant encounters and routine formalities. Alexander left for work early in the morning and returned late at night, by which time Sophia had already retreated to her room. They only appeared together when necessary, before the press, at high society events, and during obligatory dinners. Every time they stepped out in public, Alexander played the role of the devoted husband flawlessly, his arm around her waist, whispers of sweet nothings into her ear that both knew were devoid of meaning. But the moment they stepped back into their mansion, they reverted to strangers, each lost in their own world. Despite knowing this marriage was nothing but an arrangement, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. Every night she lay in a bed that didn't feel like hers, listening to the distant sound of Alexander's footsteps echoing down the hall. He never entered her room, never made an effort to bridge the gap between them. She reminded herself not to expect anything, and yet with each passing day, Sophia couldn't ignore one undeniable truth. No matter how cold Alexander Grayson was, his mere presence still made her heart race. Sophia didn't know exactly when things began to shift. Maybe it was the lingering glances, the accidental brushes of skin, or perhaps it was the strange awareness she felt whenever Alexander was near. At first, she tried to ignore it. She reminded herself that this was just a contract, that Alexander was not a man capable of love. But no matter how much she tried, She couldn't overlook the subtle moments that were slowly changing the atmosphere between them. One evening, after a long and exhausting day at the hospital with her mother, Sophia returned home with a heavy heart. She sank onto the living room couch, staring blankly at the flickering flames in the fireplace. She hadn't even heard the footsteps behind her until a deep, familiar voice broke the silence. "You're still awake?" She turned to see Alexander standing in the doorway, his tie loosened, the top buttons of his shirt undone. He looked different. Not the cold, untouchable CEO the world knew, but a man who, for once, seemed softer. She pressed her lips together and shook her head. "I couldn't sleep." Instead of heading to his office like he usually did, Alexander poured himself a drink and, surprisingly, sat beside her. "How was your day?" Sophia sighed, her gaze still fixed on the fire. "My mother, she's not doing well. The doctors aren't sure how much longer she has." Her voice wavered despite her efforts to stay composed. Alexander didn't respond immediately. A silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but heavy, filled with something unspoken. And then, in a voice that was firm, unwavering, he said, "She'll get the best care. You don't have to worry about that." Sophia inhaled shakily. "Thank you." She hadn't expected comfort from him, and Alexander was not the type to offer it, but in that moment, as she truly looked at him, she saw something different. Something unfamiliar, flickering in his sharp blue eyes. She reminded herself that it didn't mean anything, that this was still just a contract. But the intensity in his gaze told a different story. It lingered, a silent question she wasn't ready to answer, and even as she told herself to look away, her pulse betrayed her, quickening under his unrelenting stare. And in that moment, Sophia realized something between them had begun to change. It wasn't just the way his fingers lingered on her skin a second too long. It wasn't just the way his voice softened when he spoke her name. It was something deeper, something unspoken yet undeniable. The air between them was no longer cold indifference. It was charged with something dangerous, something she wasn't sure she was ready to name. The rainstorm that night mirrored the storm raging inside Sophia, a whirlwind of emotions she couldn't control. She had spent the entire day at the hospital, watching her once strong mother grow weaker under the weight of her illness. She felt helpless, exhausted, as if the world was closing in on her. When she returned home, Sophia didn't go straight to her room. Instead, she collapsed onto the living room couch, staring blankly at the flickering flames in the fireplace. She didn't realize Alexander was there until his deep voice broke the silence. "Are you okay?" She startled, glancing up at him. Alexander wasn't dressed in his usual pristine suit. His white shirt was slightly wrinkled, the top buttons undone, revealing the tanned skin of his collarbone. For the first time, he didn't look like an untouchable CEO. He looked like a man. She took a shaky breath. "My mother. The doctors said she might not make it." Alexander was silent for a long moment. Then he stepped forward and sat beside her, closer than ever before. "You don't have to go through this alone," he said, his voice steady, certain. Sophia let out a hollow laugh. "Do I have a choice?" Something flickered in Alexander's sharp blue eyes. Anger? Frustration? Or something deeper, something he couldn't name? "I'm here, Sophia," he murmured, his voice so low it was almost a whisper. She looked at him, her emerald eyes shimmering with unshed tears. There was something in the way he said those words that made her chest tighten. And then, before she could process it, Alexander reached out, his fingers tilting her chin up. His gaze burned into hers, dark and unreadable. "If I kiss you right now," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "will you push me away?" Sophia didn't answer. She couldn't. And that was all the permission Alexander needed. His lips crashed against hers, hot, demanding, filled with a hunger neither of them had acknowledged until now. Sophia stiffened for a second, but then, like a moth drawn to flame, she melted into him. Her fingers clenched the fabric of his shirt as he pulled her closer, his mouth exploring hers with unrestrained intensity. This kiss wasn't soft. It wasn't careful. It was possession, a declaration. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Alexander rested his forehead against hers, his breath hot against her lips. "This isn't just a contract anymore, Sophia," he whispered. And in that moment she knew everything had changed forever. After that night, nothing between Sophia and Alexander was the same. The next morning she woke up half convinced that it had all been a dream, but when she stepped out of her room, she found Alexander sitting in the kitchen, one hand holding a cup of coffee, the other flipping through a newspaper as if nothing had changed. It wasn't until she walked past him that he spoke. "You forgot something." Sophia stopped, turning to him with a frown. "What?" Alexander folded his newspaper, placed his coffee down, and looked at her with that same piercing blue gaze, one that now held something new, something unreadable. Then, with an unsettling calm, he reached out, his fingertip grazing her chin. "I didn't get my good morning kiss." Her heart slammed against her ribs. She opened her mouth to protest, but before she could utter a single word, Alexander leaned in, pressing a slow, possessive kiss against her lips. This wasn't like the reckless, desperate kiss from the night before. This was a statement, and it wasn't the last. The next morning, and every morning after that, Alexander continued this ritual as if it were an unbreakable habit. Sometimes it was a brief, teasing brush of lips. Other times it was deeper, lingering, stealing the breath from her lungs. And each time, Sophia felt herself losing more control. But it didn't stop there. His touches became more frequent. If she was reading on the couch, he would settle beside her, one arm draped over her shoulder, his fingers tracing lazy circles against her skin. If she was cooking, he would stand behind her, his breath warm against her neck, as he murmured something entirely unnecessary. And the worst part was at night. Though she still slept in her own room, she often woke in the middle of the night with the inexplicable feeling that she wasn't alone. Sometimes it was the sound of his footsteps outside her door. Sometimes it was the faint creak of the door opening. And sometimes it was the warmth of him near, though she never dared open her eyes to confirm. Sophia knew she should keep her distance. But each time Alexander pulled her into his arms, each time his gaze burned into hers, she wasn't sure how much longer she could resist. Because with every passing day, he was slowly dismantling every wall she had built. Sophia had never seen Alexander lose control. He was always the composed one, the man who calculated everything with ruthless precision. But tonight, as she woke up in a hospital bed with his hand gripping hers tightly, his gaze wild with fear and anger, she knew something had changed. "How could you be so reckless?" His voice was hoarse, laced with an emotion she couldn't quite name. Sophia blinked, trying to piece together what had happened. She remembered the blaring sound of a car horn, the blinding headlights, and the brief moment when someone had pulled her back before darkness consumed her. I wasn't paying attention," she whispered. Alexander clenched his jaw, his blue eyes darkening. "Do you have any idea what went through my mind when I saw you lying on that street?" His voice cracked, something she had never heard before. His grip on her hand tightened, as if he was afraid she might slip away again. "I thought I had lost you, Sophia, and for the first time in my life, I realized there is something I can't afford to lose." She didn't answer because the truth was, she didn't know. But she saw the answer in his eyes, the fear, the panic, and the emotion she had spent so long convincing herself didn't exist between them. He didn't say another word. His grip on her hand tightened, as if afraid she would vanish if he let go. Then he leaned down, pressing a kiss to her forehead, not like the ones before. This one trembled with something raw, something desperate. It tasted of fear, of regret, of the terrifying realization that he could have lost her. And when he pulled back, his voice was raw, stripped of all pretense. "This was never just a contract for me." And Sophia knew, no matter how many times she had tried to deny it, she could no longer lie to herself. Sophia stood by the bedroom window, gazing at the city lights. The night was calm, but her heart was anything but. Alexander's words still echoed in her mind. This was never just a contract for me. She had tried to deny it, tried to keep her distance, but how could she lie to herself any longer? She felt his presence before he even touched her, a warm breath against her neck, then strong arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "What are you thinking about?" His deep voice rumbled through her. Sophia placed her hand over his, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You?" "Us." Alexander turned her to face him. His piercing blue eyes no longer held their usual coldness. Instead, they were filled with something raw, something real. "I love you, Sophia," he murmured, his fingers brushing against her cheek. "No contracts, just us." She looked into his eyes, her heart pounding, and for the first time, she didn't hesitate. She rose onto her toes, pressing her lips against his, a kiss of acceptance, of love, of certainty. When they finally parted, Alexander chuckled softly, resting his forehead against hers. "I'm still going to ask for my morning kiss every day." Sophia laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "And this time, I'll always be ready." Sophia stood on the balcony of their villa, the gentle breeze playing with her soft curls. The night air was crisp, but the warmth behind her was unmistakable. The warmth of the man who had once been untouchable, yet now refused to let her go. The night sky stretched endlessly above them, dotted with a million twinkling stars. But the warmest light still came from the man stepping up behind her. Alexander wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "What are you thinking about, my love?" His voice was deep, familiar, yet it still sent a shiver down her spine. She smiled, placing her hands over his. "Just that. A year ago, I never imagined we'd be here." Alexander turned her to face him, his piercing blue eyes now filled with something softer, something real. "Neither did I. But I know one thing." He leaned in, his lips brushing against hers as he whispered, "I never stopped wanting you." Sophia laughed softly, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Then you can want me forever. How about that?" Alexander didn't answer with words. Instead, he kissed her, a slow, lingering kiss, one filled with everything they had been through. When they pulled apart, he smirked. "Morning, night. I'll always ask for my kiss." Sophia stood on her toes, pressing a feather-light kiss to the corner of his lips. "And this time, I'll always be the one to kiss you first." Under the endless stars, they laughed together, knowing their love was no longer bound by a contract, but by forever. Thank you for watching until the end. If you were captivated by the emotional love story of Sophia and Alexander, leave a comment with the word kiss to show that you felt the passion and intensity in every kiss they shared. And don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss more romantic stories like this. Love sometimes starts with a contract, but who knows? Maybe a single kiss can change everything? Olivia Carter never imagined that her first day at Sterling Dynamics would turn into a complete disaster. As an ambitious executive assistant, she wanted to make a great impression. Instead, chaos welcomed her. The moment she stepped into the building, a major system failure struck. Servers crashed, employees panicked, phones rang nonstop. "None of the files are accessible," someone shouted. "We might lose everything." Olivia gritted her teeth, trying to stay calm. She quickly dialed IT support, but the line was busy. "Perfect. The digital age, yet technology decides to betray me on my first day," she muttered, slamming the phone onto the desk. Right then, a tall, sharply dressed man walked into the office. Impeccable suit, polished shoes, a commanding presence, yet he looked far too calm amidst the chaos. Olivia didn't think twice. She marched straight up to him. "You took way too long. Get to work. Our system is down." The man raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback. "Excuse me, what?" Olivia crossed her arms, tapping her foot impatiently. "No time for questions. Fix it now, before I lose my job." She had no idea that the man standing before her wasn't an IT technician. He was Nathan Sterling, the CEO of the company. Without wasting a second, Olivia pushed the man into the chair and pointed at the screen. "Hurry up, just press a few keys and fix this already." Nathan raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "And what if I told you I can't fix it?" he asked, his tone calm. Olivia let out an exasperated sigh. "Oh, fantastic. First day on the job and I get stuck with an IT guy who has no idea what he's doing." Nathan remained composed, but there was an undeniable glint of amusement in his eyes. So, what exactly do you want me to do? Pretend to care. Type something. Look like you're actually trying. Olivia crossed her arms, emphasizing every word like a boss giving orders. Nathan shrugged, then slowly placed his hands on the keyboard, tapping a few keys as if he was putting in the world's greatest effort. Olivia leaned in, watching closely. Wow, so slow. Are you typing with just one finger? Nathan glanced up, smirking. Are you seriously telling me to work faster? Yes. What do you think this is? Brain surgery? Just click something, fix it, and let's move on. Nathan sighed dramatically, then pressed a single key on the keyboard. The entire office lit up as the system came back online. A collective sigh of relief filled the room. Hallelujah! Someone cheered. Olivia clapped her hands, victorious. Finally! That wasn't so hard, was it? But then she noticed Nathan adjusting his cufflinks, his smirk growing. And who said I work here? Olivia froze. Her brain took a full 3 seconds to process his words. Right at that moment, a man in a gray suit rushed in, slightly out of breath. Mr. Sterling, the board is waiting for you in the meeting room. Silence. Every single person in the office stared at Olivia. Nathan folded his arms, tilting his head slightly, clearly entertained. Miss Carter, Nathan leaned in slightly, his smirk widening. Any more orders for me? Olivia felt her entire world collapse in slow motion. The air in the office grew unbearably thick as every pair of eyes fixated on her. Oh no! Oh no, 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 no! This isn't happening! Heat flooded her face. Her palms went ice cold. She wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Olivia felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. She had just bossed around, scolded, and even rushed the CEO of the company like he was a clueless intern. And now he was staring directly at her, clearly entertained by this disaster. I'm so fired. No one moved. No one even dared to breathe. Then Nathan let out a quiet chuckle, shaking his head. That was interesting. He turned to his assistant. The board has been waiting long enough. Let's go. Olivia exhaled, thinking she had escaped. Maybe she could apologize later and salvage what was left of her dignity. But then, Miss Carter, come with me. She froze. What? Nathan raised an eyebrow. You wanted to explain the system issue to the board, didn't you? The entire office held its breath. It felt like she had just been dragged into a courtroom with Nathan as the all-powerful judge. With no way out, she forced her legs to follow him into the boardroom. 20 minutes later, Olivia sat stiffly at the massive boardroom table, surrounded by high-level executives all staring at her. So, how exactly did you solve the issue? One director asked. Olivia swallowed hard. Well, I made a mistake. Silence. She squeezed her eyes shut, then decided to just say it. I mistook Mr. Sterling for an IT technician and asked him to fix the system. The room went dead silent. One of the directors dropped his pen out of pure shock. Nathan leaned back in his chair, amusement flickering in his eyes. And she was quite efficient. Rude, but efficient. No one dared to laugh, but a few executives coughed awkwardly, struggling to hold it in. Olivia just wanted to disappear into thin air. When the meeting ended, Nathan walked up to her slowly. You're the first person to ever give me orders. Olivia nodded cautiously. I apologize? Nathan folded his arms, considering something, then finally spoke words she never expected. I want you as my personal assistant. Olivia blinked rapidly. Excuse me? Starting today, you work directly with me. Her mind went blank. One moment she was yelling at the CEO. Now she was his assistant? She wasn't sure if this was a career opportunity or a life sentence. But one thing was clear. Her life was never going to be the same. Olivia still couldn't believe what had just happened. Just hours ago, she thought she'd be fired. Now, she was the personal assistant to the CEO. Everything was happening too fast. As soon as Olivia sat down at her new desk, the phone began ringing nonstop. Before she could even answer, Nathan appeared, holding a thick folder. You have 3 days to organize a charity gala for the company, he said casually. Olivia blinked. 3 days? That's right, the guest list includes top CEOs, politicians, and the media. I expect perfection. Olivia gaped at him. A high-profile event in 3 days? Lated, doesn't the company have an event planning team? Yes, but now you're in charge. Nathan shrugged. Olivia wanted to scream, but instead she gripped the folder tightly and tried to stay calm. The next 3 days were pure chaos. The florist canceled last minute. The venue requested last-minute design changes. The band backed out. The menu hadn't been approved. Olivia ran around the office, made dozens of phone calls, and tried to fix everything before it was too late. Meanwhile, Nathan remained completely unbothered. On the final day, Olivia stormed into his office, her eyes dark from exhaustion. "We have a serious problem," she announced. Nathan looked up, as if he had been expecting this. "Tell me." Olivia slammed the folder onto his desk. "The decorator quit, the band canceled, the chef refuses to adjust the menu, and I haven't slept in 3 days?" Nathan rested his chin on his hand, watching her. "So, in other words, everything is a disaster?" Olivia groaned. A very accurate summary. He didn't seem concerned. Instead, he picked up his phone and made a call. "George, I want the guest list and invitations finalized by tonight." After hanging up, he turned to Olivia. "The rest is up to you." Olivia stared at him. "That's it? No backup plan? No motivational speech?" Nathan smirked. "You don't need luck. You need coffee." Olivia glared at him, but still turned around and got back to work. Despite all the setbacks, the gala turned out perfect. Nathan stood beside Olivia, holding a glass of wine, his expression unreadable. "You did better than I expected." Olivia was exhausted but proud. One thing was certain, she had passed Nathan Sterling's first test. Olivia stood still amidst the dazzling scene of the gala. After 3 days of racing against time, everything was finally perfect. The grand chandeliers glowed, the elegant tables gleamed, and the city's most powerful people chatted over fine wine. She had done it, but instead of celebrating, Olivia felt a pair of eyes watching her. Nathan Sterling, as calm and unreadable as ever, stood across the room, a glass of wine in his hand, his gaze fixed on her. He was watching her. Olivia tried to ignore it, but her heartbeat betrayed her. Needing a moment to breathe, she stepped out onto the balcony, letting the cool air clear her mind. But before she could relax, a voice sounded behind her. "Running away?" Olivia turned around, facing David Lancaster, a sharp businessman and one of Nathan's biggest rivals. "Just enjoying a moment of peace." She folded her arms. David smirked, swirling his drink. "You and Nathan seemed close." Olivia frowned. "We work together." "Do you really believe that's all it is?" David tilted his head, his voice layered with meaning. Before Olivia could answer, a deep voice interrupted. "I don't recall inviting you into this conversation." Nathan stood at the entrance, his eyes cold and unwavering. David chuckled, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Relax, Sterling, just a harmless chat." Nathan didn't blink. "Olivia doesn't need your insinuations." David held his gaze for a moment, then shrugged and walked away, but not before casting Olivia one last knowing glance. Once they were alone, Nathan turned to Olivia. "Did he bother you?" Olivia forced a small smile. "I can handle myself." Nathan stepped closer, narrowing the space between them. "I know." His voice was softer now. "But that doesn't mean I'll stand by and watch." Olivia swallowed. Something had shifted between them. Nathan held her gaze. Then he leaned in slightly, but stopped. Waiting. Olivia didn't step back. She didn't kiss him, but she also didn't walk away. Nathan smirked, as if he knew exactly what was happening. "We have time," he murmured, stepping back, leaving her with a racing heart and more confusion than ever. Olivia thought that after that fateful night, everything would go back to normal. She was wrong. From that day, Nathan began a quiet but persistent pursuit. He was everywhere, meetings, coincidental lunches, even delivering coffee to her desk every morning. "Do you seriously have nothing better to do?" Olivia folded her arms. Nathan just shrugged, smirking. I do, but no deal, no project, no billion-dollar contract is as important as this. At first, Olivia thought it was a joke, but Nathan never gave up. One late night, as she worked alone, Nathan appeared at her office door, holding a box of pastries. You haven't eaten, have you? Olivia sighed. Why do you keep doing this? Nathan stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. Because I care about you, and I'll keep doing this until you realize you care about me too. She thought she could keep resisting, but then on a rainy night, Nathan called, Come downstairs. Looking out the window, she saw him standing in the rain, umbrella in hand, waiting. When she reached him, Nathan gently touched her cheek, his voice soft but firm. Give me a chance. Olivia had fought this long enough. She placed her hand on his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, strong, unwavering, just like him. She let out a breath she didn't even realize she had been holding. All right, Nathan, she whispered. You win. Nathan's smile grew as he pulled her closer. You won't regret it. And this time Olivia knew she wouldn't run away. 1 year later, Olivia stood on the rooftop of Sterling Dynamics, the night breeze brushing against her skin, carrying the distant hum of the city below. She didn't understand why Nathan had called her up here on a Saturday night, but the moment she stepped onto the helipad, her breath caught. The city lights stretched endlessly beneath her, sparkling like a universe turned upside down. A narrow path, scattered with rose petals, led straight to where Nathan was standing. Dressed in a sleek black suit, his hair slightly tousled from the wind, his gaze unchanged, still looking at her the same way. Olivia let out a small laugh, crossing her arms. Nathan, what are you up to now? He stepped closer, took her hands in his, and pulled her gently toward him. Something I've been thinking about for a long time. Her heartbeat pounded. Olivia, his voice was deep, steady. Since the day you walked into my life, I haven't had a single, boring moment. She laughed softly, but her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I used to believe I had control over everything, but then you showed up and I realized I don't want control anymore. Nathan slowly lowered himself to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. A ring gleamed under the city lights. Olivia Carter, Nathan's voice was steady, but his hands trembled ever so slightly. I've built empires, closed impossible deals, and led thousands of people, but nothing has ever terrified me more than this moment. He took a deep breath, eyes locked onto hers. Would you do me the honor of making sure I never win another argument for the rest of my life? Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks. No hesitation, no doubt. Yes. Nathan smiled, slipping the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss. Deep, passionate, and filled with everything he couldn't say in words. Behind them, fireworks exploded, painting the sky in brilliant colors. But Olivia saw only one thing. The man in front of her, the man she never thought she'd love, the man she couldn't imagine living without. 3 months later, are you nervous? Nathan leaned in, whispering as Olivia stood at the end of the aisle, her wedding dress making her look like a literal goddess from a fairy tale. Olivia swallowed hard, gripping her bouquet. No, I'm fine, she said, but her voice was absolutely not fine. Nathan smirked. Good, because you're about to marry the man you once ordered around like a clueless intern. Olivia stomped on his foot. Can you not bring that up on our wedding day? Nathan chuckled. Not a chance. The ceremony was perfect, and everyone could feel the chaotic but undeniable love between them. When it was time for their vows, Olivia tried to keep a straight face. Nathan Sterling, you are the most infuriating man I have ever met. But somehow you're also the only one I can't live without. I promise to love you, take care of you, even when you constantly annoy me. Nathan grinned, squeezing her hands. Olivia Carter, you are the first woman to ever boss me around like an IT guy, and somehow I fell in love with that. So I promise to love you, even when you keep ordering me around every single day. 3 months after the wedding, Nathan sat on the couch, casually reading the newspaper. Olivia walked into the kitchen, arms crossed, one eyebrow raised. Hey darling husband, get me a coffee. Nathan peeked over his newspaper. Oh, another order. Let me guess. You forgot that you're not my boss anymore, didn't you? Olivia narrowed her eyes. Do you want to survive today? Nathan closed the newspaper, pretending to think. You know, since we got married, I've realized something. What? Olivia crossed her arms, suspicious. Nathan grinned mischievously. I am no longer the CEO of Sterling Dynamics. I am officially an intern for Olivia Sterling. Olivia laughed, flipping her hair dramatically. Took you long enough to figure it out? Nathan sighed dramatically, standing up to pour her coffee. How did I end up marrying such a terrifying woman? Olivia took the coffee, sipping it like a queen. Because you like it. Nathan leaned closer, smirking. Like, oh no, darling. He reached for her hand dramatically. I am utterly, hopelessly, tragically in love with my terrifying wife. Olivia rolled her eyes, laughing as she swatted his arm. And before Olivia could respond, Nathan pulled her into a kiss. Just to remind her that no matter who was in charge at home, they were always a team. Life with Olivia and Nathan was never boring. They could argue over who should do the dishes. Nathan could tease Olivia every day about how she once ordered him around, but behind every playful jab was an unshakable love. One evening, Olivia curled up on the couch, watching a movie with a bowl of popcorn in her lap. Nathan glanced at her, then narrowed his eyes. She realized something. Olivia glanced over. What? Nathan smirked. You don't order me around anymore. Olivia shrugged. That's because I don't need to. You already do everything I want automatically. Nathan burst out laughing. I married an evil genius. Olivia grinned victoriously, and Nathan pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. And I love it. What started as a ridiculous misunderstanding ended in a love no one could replace. So, what do you think about Olivia and Nathan's story? If you enjoyed this story, leave a comment, rate it from 0 to 10, and share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another amazing story. And if you made it this far, comment, Bossy love to see how many people adore this story. Thank you for being here. See you in the next story. The evening skyline of London shimmered like a crown of golden lights, reflecting the dazzling success Marcus Whitfield had achieved. Yet, inside his glass-walled office, the enigmatic CEO stared out with a quiet intensity, his storm-gray eyes betraying the emptiness lurking beneath his power. At 38, Marcus was the epitome of success, charismatic, brilliant, and ruthless. But behind his steel-gray eyes lay a void, one that no amount of power or wealth could fill. Across the Atlantic, Elena Hart, a renowned corporate lawyer in New York, prepared for a different kind of battle. 5 years ago, she had walked away from Marcus, leaving behind the dreams they once shared. But she didn't leave alone. She carried a secret, one she had guarded fiercely, a truth that would soon upend both their lives. But now she was returning to London, not for revenge, but for justice. And by her side stood Alexander, the son Marcus never knew, ready to face the father who had once turned his back on love. Marcus Whitfield had become a symbol of untouchable success. Born into a middle-class family in the outskirts of Manchester, he had single-handedly built Whitfield Technologies into a global tech empire, with branches spanning Europe and Asia. Known for his sharp instincts, unparalleled negotiation skills, and ruthless decision-making, Marcus saw power not just as a goal, but as the ultimate measure of worth. But Elena Hart had seen another side of him, a man driven by ambition yet deeply vulnerable. They met at an international law conference in New York. Marcus was captivated by Elena's intelligence and integrity, while she was drawn to his confidence and piercing insight. Their romance was a fusion of intellect and passion, but it was also fraught with challenges. Everything changed when Elena revealed she was pregnant. At the time, Marcus was deep in negotiations to acquire a major tech firm, and his response was far from what she had hoped. To him, the child wasn't a joy but a complication that could jeopardize his reputation and the company's future. Marcus asked Elena to consider an abortion, calling it the most practical solution to safeguard their future. Devastated, Elena refused. She couldn't sacrifice her child for Marcus's ambition. Heartbroken and disillusioned, she left London, choosing to start anew in New York, where she built a thriving career and raised Alexander with boundless love. Over the next 5 years, Marcus continued to climb the ladder of power, but a void lingered within him. He never spoke of Elena, but the memories of their time together and the choices he had made haunted him in quiet moments amidst the grandeur of the empire he had built. The annual Whitfield Technologies Charity Gala was one of London's most prestigious events. Held at the iconic History Museum, the glittering chandeliers reflected off elegant gowns and tailored suits. Marcus Whitfield, clad in a perfectly tailored dark suit, moved through the room with his usual composed demeanor, his sharp gaze catching every detail of the evening. But tonight was different. As Marcus conversed with business partners, a ripple of whispers spread through the grand hall. All eyes turned toward the entrance, where a woman in a striking crimson dress made her entrance. It was Elena Hart. Elena walked with confident grace, a faint smile on her lips, but her eyes carried the determination of someone preparing for battle. Her hand held tightly onto Alexander's, a boy of about 5, dressed impeccably in a tiny tuxedo. Marcus's world tilted as his gaze locked onto the boy's storm-gray eyes, eyes that mirrored his own. Time seemed to stop for Marcus. He couldn't look away. Elena had returned, not alone, but with the son he never knew he had. Elena wasted no time. As their eyes met, she tilted her head in a polite nod before walking straight toward him. "Marcus," she said, her voice calm yet laced with challenge, "I think it's time we talked." "The boy, Marcus began, but the words faltered. "At Alexander Whitfield," Elena stated firmly, "your son. And I'm not here to ask for anything. I'm here to make sure you take responsibility for the choices you've made." Before Marcus could respond, Elena turned and walked away, leaving him in stunned silence. Alexander glanced up at Marcus curiously before following his mother. Later that night, standing in his glass-walled office overlooking the city, Marcus realized his life was about to change forever. Marcus sat alone in his towering office, the lights of London flickering beneath him. His mind was a whirlwind. The image of Elena and Alexander haunted him, the boy's storm-gray eyes piercing through every layer of armor Marcus had built around himself. The next morning, Marcus received a package from Elena. Inside was a thick report detailing every unethical action Whitfield Technologies had undertaken over the past 5 years, displacing communities for factory expansions, dubious offshore accounts, and more. But what stunned Marcus wasn't the violations he already suspected, it was the accompanying reform plan. Elena hadn't just exposed the company's flaws, she had provided a way forward. The plan included establishing an independent ethics division, implementing community support programs, and committing to full financial transparency. Their meeting the following day was brief but powerful. Elena entered the conference room with her characteristic confidence. "I'm not here to destroy you, Marcus," she began. "I'm here to offer you a chance." Marcus wrestled with himself. He knew that agreeing to this plan would mean facing stock declines, legal investigations, and shareholder backlash. But for the first time in his life, he realized that power and profit could never fill the emptiness inside him. "What do you think?" Elena asked, her sharp eyes searching his face for a sign of resolve. Marcus placed his hand on the document, his gaze conflicted. "If I agree to this, I lose everything I've built." "No," Elena replied, her voice soft but firm. "You'll lose what wasn't worth keeping, but you'll gain a family, honor, and perhaps yourself." Marcus stared at her in silence, feeling the weight of her words. As she left the room, he knew he had to make a decision, not just for the company, but for his life. That night, for the first time in years, Marcus didn't review financial reports or major projects. Instead, he gazed at the sky through his window, wondering if he could start over, not as a businessman, but as a father and a man worthy of the love he had once lost. Marcus sat in the largest boardroom of Whitfield Technologies, facing the company's leadership. In front of him lay Elena's comprehensive restructuring plan. The room was tense as Marcus began to speak. "For the past 5 years, we've traded ethics for profit," Marcus said, his voice low but firm. "We've caused harm to communities, to the environment, and to the people who trusted us. Today, we have a chance to make things right." The board was silent. A few members voiced opposition, but most recognized that there was no other choice. Eventually, they agreed to Elena's plan. Marcus stepped out of the boardroom with a mix of relief and apprehension. Elena's reform plan had been approved, but a more challenging journey awaited him, the journey to regain his family's trust. Marcus stepped into Elena's apartment for the first time since she had returned to London. The space was warm and inviting, with children's drawings pinned to the walls and neatly stacked toy blocks on the shelves. Alexander was sitting on the floor, intently assembling a model spacecraft. "Hi, buddy," Marcus said softly, his tone far gentler than the commanding voice he usually carried. Alexander looked up, his storm gray eyes filled with curiosity. "Do you know how to build a spaceship?" Marcus sat down beside him, shedding his suit jacket and rolling up his sleeves. "I'm not as good as you, but I'm ready to learn." The two worked side by side, with Alexander carefully explaining each step. Marcus felt a quiet joy, a sense of connection he hadn't experienced in years. "Why weren't you here before?" Alexander asked suddenly, his innocent eyes locking onto Marcus's. The question hit Marcus like a bolt, but he took a deep breath before replying. "I made mistakes, Alexander. I thought work was more important, and I didn't realize what really mattered until now. But I promise, I won't miss any more moments with you." That evening, Marcus picked up Alexander after school to fulfill his promise of taking the boy to the Whitfield Tower Observatory. For the first time, he felt awkward, like a father in training. "You really like Jupiter, don't you?" Marcus asked as they stepped into the elevator. Alexander nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, because it's the biggest planet and has the most moons. But you know, not all moons are easy to see. You need a telescope." The boy's innocent words stopped Marcus in his tracks. He realized that, like Jupiter and its moons, some connections weren't immediately visible, but with a little effort, he could discover and understand more about his son. As Alexander eagerly explained how to adjust the telescope, Marcus listened intently, not just to learn about the universe, but to understand his son's world. "You're really good at this," Marcus said, feeling a genuine pride he hadn't experienced before. "Who do you think I take after?" Alexander asked, his storm gray eyes gleaming under the lights. "Both your mom and me," Marcus replied softly, "but you're far better than I ever was. You've already taught me so much, Alexander." In the weeks that followed, Marcus made an effort to integrate into Alexander's life, picking him up from school, attending his soccer games, and reading bedtime stories alongside Elena. Each moment was a small but meaningful step toward rebuilding the family he had missed. Marcus's efforts gradually began to show. He and Alexander spent evenings building planetary models with Legos or reading articles about space. Elena, while still keeping a cautious distance, began to see that Marcus was truly committed to change. One evening, as the three of them sat together under the warm light of the living room, Marcus said unexpectedly, "Elena, I know I can't undo the past, but if I could, I'd change everything. I want us to be a real family, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving it." Elena looked at Marcus, her gaze softening slightly. "You're on the right path, Marcus. But remember, love isn't something you win, it's something you build. One day at a time." Marcus nodded. He knew winning Elena's heart would take time and effort, but for the first time in his life, he felt ready to rise to the challenge, for her and for Alexander. One evening, after Alexander had gone to bed, Marcus found Elena in the living room. She was reading, her demeanor calm but her gaze distant. "Elena," he began, his voice sincere, "thank you for not giving up on me completely. You didn't have to give me another chance, but you did, and I didn't deserve it." Elena looked up, her sharp eyes scrutinizing him. "You've figured that out now? The Marcus I knew 5 years ago never admitted he was wrong." Marcus nodded, guilt etched on his face. "I've lost too much to realize that love and family are what truly matter. I don't want to just be a father on the sidelines, and I don't want to let you down again." Elena was silent for a long moment. "Marcus, change takes time. It's not just about wanting to change. You have to prove it. Not to me, but to Alexander." Marcus nodded. "I will. You may not believe me now, but I'll show you." On a crisp spring morning, Marcus and Alexander walked into the headquarters of Whitfield Technologies. Today wasn't a typical workday. They were here to attend the grand opening of a new community support center, a centerpiece of the restructuring plan Marcus had implemented over the past year. Alexander, dressed in a tiny suit, held his father's hand, his eyes wide with excitement as he spotted the red ribbon stretched across the entrance. Elena was already there, mingling with board members and representatives from nonprofit organizations. When she saw Marcus and Alexander approaching, she smiled softly. "Dad, can I cut the ribbon?" Alexander asked, his voice brimming with excitement. "That's your job," Marcus replied, ruffling the boy's hair. "You're the reason we're here." The ceremony began with Marcus stepping up to the podium. Behind him stood Elena, who had helped him reshape the entire corporation, and Alexander, who had become the center of every decision he made. "Today, we're not just opening a community support center," Marcus said, his voice resonating with emotion. "We're opening a new chapter for Whitfield Technologies, a chapter built on responsibility, transparency, and compassion. This isn't just a corporate commitment, it's a personal one, to our community and to my family." Marcus knelt so Alexander could step up to the podium. Amid applause, the boy cut the ribbon, his face lit with pure joy. Elena watched the scene, feeling a deep sense of pride and a quiet peace in her heart. After the ceremony, the three of them strolled through a nearby park. Alexander ran ahead, hopping over puddles and pointing to the sky, explaining constellations even though the sun was still shining. Marcus and Elena walked side by side in silence, until Marcus finally spoke. "I know this path won't be easy," Marcus said, his voice steady and sincere, "but I want you to know that I'll never go back to who I was. You and Alexander have changed me forever." Elena stopped and turned to him. "Marcus, change is never just a moment, it's a journey. But I've seen how far you've come, and I believe you'll keep going." "I will," Marcus replied, "not just for you and Alexander, but because I want to be someone you both can be proud of." Elena smiled, a gentle, hopeful smile. "Then let's continue this journey together, one step at a time." That evening, the three of them sat on Elena's balcony. Alexander held a telescope, pointing out stars. "Mom, Dad, can we do this every night?" Marcus looked at Elena, then at Alexander. "We can, son, and we will." The night sky sparkled with stars, but for them, the warm glow of love and hope shone brightest of all. On a clear, sunny day, Marcus drove Elena and Alexander to the beach, a place they had never visited together as a family. The waves lapped gently against the white sand, creating a serene and romantic backdrop. "Dad, can we build a giant sand castle?" Alexander exclaimed, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "Of course," Marcus replied with a soft chuckle. "But only if you promise not to flood the castle with seawater." Elena smiled from the back seat, feeling the warmth of the moment. Since Marcus's transformation, days like this had become a cherished part of their lives. As Alexander dashed ahead with his plastic shovel, Marcus quietly took Elena's hand, leading her for a stroll along the shore. "I have a little surprise for tonight," he said, his deep voice laced with intrigue. "A surprise?" Elena raised an eyebrow. "I hope it doesn't involve sandcastles." Marcus chuckled. "No, I think you'll like this one." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of red and gold, Marcus led Elena and Alexander to a secluded corner of the beach. Under the soft glow of lanterns strung around a table, Elena saw the carefully crafted scene before her. The table was draped in white cloth adorned with red rose petals and flickering candles. The gentle sound of the waves and the warm glow of the lights created a setting that was both romantic and intimate. "Wow, what's this, Dad?" Alexander asked, his eyes wide with wonder. "This is a special dinner for our family," Marcus replied, glancing at Elena with a meaningful look. They sat down together, enjoying a meal thoughtfully prepared for the occasion. Even Alexander, though young, sensed the significance of the moment and quietly savored his small pizza. As dinner came to a close, Marcus stood, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. He dropped to one knee in front of Elena, his eyes filled with sincerity and deep love. "Elena, years ago I made mistakes and lost the most important thing in my life. You. But since you've come back, I've realized that family is what I've always longed for. You've given me a chance to start over, and I don't want to waste another moment." He opened the box, revealing a simple yet elegant ring with a diamond that sparkled in the candlelight. "Elena, will you marry me again and build a brighter future with me for our family?" Tears glistened in Elena's eyes as she nodded softly. "Yes, Marcus, I will." Alexander let out a cheer, leaping up and running to hug them both. "So, we're a real family now, right?" "Yes, son," Marcus said, wrapping his arms around both Elena and Alexander. Under the star-filled sky, their family found not just love, but also peace and hope for the future. Nathan Carter never considered himself the type to believe in fate. He was logical, analytical, someone who built his life on facts, not feelings. That's why, as he sat in his car outside a dimly lit restaurant, he couldn't believe he had let his sister talk him into this. "This is ridiculous, Emma," Nathan groaned, gripping the steering wheel. Emma Carter, his ever-persistent older sister, stood outside the driver's side window, arms crossed, wearing that same smug expression she had perfected over the years. "Nate, you're 32, single, and if I let you, you'd spend every night buried in code, talking to no one but your computer," she said. "I'm just trying to help." "By setting me up on a blind date?" "Exactly," she grinned. "Her name's Lily Monroe. She's a nurse. She's smart, kind, and trust me, you'll like her." Nathan sighed, knowing there was no way out. He grabbed his keys and muttered, "Fine. But this is the last time." Emma smirked. "Sure it is." As Nathan stepped into the warm glow of the restaurant, he reminded himself to keep it simple, smile, be polite, end the night quickly. But as soon as he spotted the woman sitting at the corner table, his plan unraveled. Because the moment he saw Lily Monroe, something in his mind clicked. A memory just out of reach. He had seen her before. And then it hit him. She wasn't just any nurse. She was his nurse. Nathan slowed his steps, his heartbeat quickening as his eyes locked onto the woman sitting at the corner table. Lily Monroe. She wasn't dramatically different from his memory. Same soft eyes, the same neatly tied back hair, the same quiet composure. But Nathan couldn't shake the feeling. He knew her. He took a steadying breath. Maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe it's just a coincidence. But as he approached, Lily glanced up, and for a split second, something flickered in her eyes. Hesitation, recognition. Then, just as quickly it was gone. She smiled and stood, extending her hand. "Nathan," she said, her voice gentle. He shook her hand, holding it just a little longer than necessary. "Lily, nice to meet you." They sat down, a brief silence settling between them before Lily spoke. "Emma says you're some kind of tech genius?" Her tone was playful, teasing. Nathan chuckled, shaking his head. "Genius is a stretch. I run a software company. Nothing too exciting." "Already more impressive than me," Lily replied. "I'm just a nurse." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Just a nurse? Pretty sure saving lives beats staring at a screen all day." She smiled, but there was a flicker of something, uncertainty, maybe discomfort. He caught it, but chose not to press. Instead, he asked, "So, how did Emma rope you into this?" Lily laughed softly, a genuine sound. "One of my patients is friends with her. Apparently, you're a nice guy, but tragically unavailable. So I figured, why not?" Nathan smirked. "Tragically unavailable, huh?" "Do you think it's true?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. Nathan wanted to deny it, but deep down, he knew it wasn't far from the truth. For the past 3 years, he had buried himself in work, keeping relationships at arm's length. He sighed. "I guess. I let myself stay busy." Lily nodded, something knowing in her gaze. Everyone's running from something. The comment landed heavier than he expected, an unspoken weight settling between them. He wasn't sure how to respond, wasn't sure if he should respond. Then, suddenly, a memory surfaced. Hospital hallways, the sterile smell of disinfectant, a gentle hand adjusting his blanket when he couldn't move on his own. Nathan blinked, staring at Lily more intently. The pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. "You were there," he murmured, voice dropping. Lily froze. "What?" 3 years ago, after my car accident, you were my nurse." She didn't respond right away, but her fingers tightened slightly around her glass. Then she smiled. Too carefully, too controlled. "You're mistaken," she said firmly. "We've never met before tonight." Nathan leaned back in his chair, watching Lily closely. She was lying. He didn't know why, but he knew she remembered him. She just didn't want to admit it. "Are you sure?" Nathan asked, his voice quieter now. Lily's polite smile didn't waver. "I think I'd remember if we had met before." But he caught it, the slight tension in her hands, the brief flicker in her eyes, before she looked away. Nathan nodded slowly. He knew pressing her now wouldn't get him anywhere. If she wasn't ready to talk, she wouldn't. "All right," he said, taking a sip of water. "Maybe I'm mistaken." Lily visibly relaxed as he steered the conversation elsewhere. They talked about their careers, travel, and books, but the thought never left Nathan's mind. Something was being left unsaid. That night, sitting in his car, Nathan opened an old folder on his phone labeled Recovery. Inside were photos from his time in the hospital, his totaled car, medical bills, a blurry selfie Emma had taken of him in a wheelchair. He scrolled through them all, stopping at the one image that made his breath hitch. On the bedside table was his hospital bracelet, and beside it a small note with delicate handwriting. "Stay strong, Nathan. The road ahead is hard, but you're harder to break." Nathan inhaled deeply. No other nurse had done this for him. It had to be Lily. He stared at the words for a long time before finally grabbing his phone. Without overthinking, he called her. She picked up on the third ring. "Nathan?" She sounded surprised. "I don't mean to make things weird," he began, keeping his tone as light as possible. "But I can't stop thinking about this." There was a pause on the other end. "I don't know what you mean," Lily said, her voice steady. "Lily, you wrote me a note," Nathan pressed, staring at the picture on his screen. "A small message on my bedside table. I still have it." She inhaled sharply, her fingers trembling slightly against her glass. "Nathan!" "I'm not trying to corner you," he said quickly, his voice gentle but firm. "I just need to understand. Why won't you admit it?" Lily looked away, her jaw tightening. A storm of emotions flickered across her face. Denial, regret, something deeper that she refused to name. Finally, she exhaled, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because if I admit it, it becomes real. And if it's real, then it means I mattered to you in a way I never should have." And then she hung up. Nathan stared at his phone, frustration and confusion twisting inside him. No, this wasn't just the past. Not when it still haunted him like this. Nathan couldn't shake the thought of Lily, no matter how clearly she had tried to shut him down. If the past didn't matter, why had she reacted the way she did? What was she hiding? For the next few days, he kept his distance, but the questions lingered. This wasn't just a coincidence, and he knew it. One afternoon, during his lunch break, Nathan stopped by a small cafe near the hospital where Lily worked. He wasn't intentionally trying to run into her, but when she walked in, he knew this wasn't an opportunity he could ignore. Their eyes met instantly. She hesitated for only a second before letting out a quiet sigh and walking over to his table. "Are you following me now?" she asked. Her tone teasing but cautious. Nathan arched a brow. "Just a coincidence. But since you're here, maybe we should talk." She hesitated, then pulled out a chair. He didn't want to push, but he also couldn't pretend nothing had happened. "I don't get it," Nathan said. "Why deny it? It was just a note. It's not a big deal." Lily stared into her coffee, debating her answer. Finally, she murmured, "Because I didn't want to be part of your past. I didn't want you to look at me and only see a reminder of something painful." Nathan was quiet. He hadn't thought of it that way before. But to him, Lily wasn't just a memory from a difficult time. She was the reason he had gotten through it. He looked at her, and for the first time he saw the hesitation in her eyes, the uncertainty. "Lily, you weren't just someone who took care of me when I was weak. You were the reason I stood back up." She lifted her gaze to his, something unreadable flickering across her face. Not a denial, but not acceptance either. "I don't know, Nathan," she admitted softly. "I don't know if I can let this become something more." Nathan knew Lily was still fighting her own battles, but whether she was ready to admit it or not, Their past had already tied them together, and this time he wasn't going to walk away. Nathan hadn't seen Lily in the days following their conversation at the cafe, but she was never far from his mind. He wasn't sure if she needed space or if she was trying to push him away, but he knew one thing: this wasn't over. Then, late one night, his phone rang, an unknown number. He hesitated for a second before answering. "Nathan?" Lily's voice was rushed, unsteady. "Lily, what's wrong?" He sat up immediately, sensing the panic in her tone. "It's Noah, my brother. He's having trouble breathing. I'm taking him to the hospital now." Nathan didn't think. He grabbed his keys. "I'll be there." "Nathan, you don't have to." "I'm not asking, Lily. I'm coming." He didn't give her a chance to argue before hanging up. As he sped toward the hospital, a heavy weight settled in his chest. He had never met Noah, but from the way Lily spoke about him, he knew the boy was her entire world, and if anything happened to him, it would break her. When Nathan arrived, he found Lily standing outside the emergency room, arms wrapped around herself. She looked smaller, more exhausted than usual. When she spotted him, a flicker of resistance crossed her face, but instead of arguing, she just let out a shaky breath. "He's inside. The doctors said his breathing attack was worse than normal," her voice wavered. Nathan didn't say anything. He just stood beside her. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "I didn't want you to see this part of my life, Nathan. I don't want anyone to see it." He turned to her, his gaze steady. "Lily, if I'm only here for the easy parts, then I don't deserve to be here at all." She studied him for a long moment, searching his face for something. Then, for the first time, she didn't push him away. Lily didn't know why she let Nathan stay that night. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was the overwhelming fear of losing Noah, or maybe it was something else, something deeper that she wasn't ready to admit. Either way, when Nathan sat beside her in the waiting room, she didn't ask him to leave. Time moved slowly. The hospital at night was eerily quiet, filled only with the hurried footsteps of nurses and the distant hum of machines. Nathan didn't say much, but he didn't leave either, and somehow, his presence alone brought a sense of calm Lily hadn't realized she needed. Near dawn, the doctor finally stepped out, offering a reassuring smile. "Noah is stable. He'll need to stay a few days for monitoring, but he's out of danger." Lily nearly collapsed in relief. She nodded, thanked the doctor, then turned to Nathan. "You don't have to stay anymore. He's okay now." Nathan tilted his head as if considering it, then simply said, "I'm not going anywhere." A few hours later, when Lily was finally allowed into Noah's room, Nathan followed. The 16-year-old looked exhausted but alert, his gray eyes filled with mischief as he spotted the unfamiliar man standing beside his sister. "So, you've got a boyfriend and didn't tell me?" Lily let out a tired sigh. "Nathan's just a friend." Noah arched a brow at her, then turned to Nathan. "You sure about that?" Nathan smirked. "Not entirely." Lily rolled her eyes, but for the first time in days, a quiet smile tugged at her lips. Nathan didn't leave in the days that followed. He showed up every morning at the hospital with coffee for Lily, brought books and magazines to help her pass the time, and even played chess with Noah when the boy started getting restless. At first, Lily tried to keep her distance, but it was hard to ignore a man who stayed by her side without expecting anything in return. One evening, as Nathan handed her a warm takeout box instead of the usual dry hospital sandwich, Lily studied him for a long moment before sighing. "Why are you doing this?" Nathan leaned back in his chair, shrugging. "Because I care. You don't have to." "Lily," he said, tilting his head, "I know you're used to carrying everything on your own, but no one said you have to do it forever." She was quiet. A part of her wanted to push him away, to protect herself from the possibility of disappointment, but another part, the part she had been trying to ignore, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. A few weeks after Noah was discharged, Nathan invited them on a picnic by the lake. Lily had planned to decline, but Noah eagerly accepted on her behalf, leaving her no choice. As the afternoon sun turned golden, casting a warm glow over the water, Noah wandered off to find a fishing spot. Nathan sat beside Lily, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small velvet box. Lily froze, her breath catching in her throat. Nathan took a steady breath before pulling out the small velvet box. He opened it, revealing a ring. Simple, timeless, just like what he felt for her. "Lily," he began, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "I'm not asking to change your life. I'm asking to share it. Every hard moment, every beautiful one. I don't want to stand on the sidelines. I want to stand beside you, always." He paused, glancing toward Noah, who was skipping stones by the water. "I love you. I love him. And if you'll have me, I want us to be a family." Lily swallowed hard, tears stinging her eyes. She had spent years running, fearing what could break her, but this time she didn't want to run. "Yes," she whispered, "I'll marry you." 1 year later, Lily stood in the middle of the school courtyard, watching Noah with pride as he passionately presented his science project. He had designed a portable air filtration system for people with respiratory conditions, inspired by his own experiences. She could see the excitement in his eyes, the kind of hope he hadn't had before. Nathan stood beside her, hands in his pockets, just as proud. When the audience started clapping, Lily glanced at him and smiled. "You kept your promise." Nathan arched a brow. "Which one?" She squeezed his hand, her voice soft but full of meaning. "You didn't leave." Nathan gave her hand a gentle squeeze in return. "Because I never planned to." After the exhibition, the three of them walked back to the car. Noah clutched his most innovative idea medal, beaming as he explained every tiny detail of his presentation. When they arrived home, he rushed inside, leaving Lily and Nathan standing outside, the golden hues of sunset casting a warm glow over everything. Lily turned to Nathan, her heart full in a way she had never let it be before. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice laced with sincerity. Nathan tilted his head. "For what?" She smiled, a lightness in her chest she hadn't felt in years. "For staying, for becoming someone I could trust." Nathan reached out, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "Lily, I told you. We're a family." She took a deep breath, letting those words settle deep inside her. Family. It had once felt like an impossible dream, but now, with Nathan and Noah, she realized she didn't have to carry everything alone anymore. For the first time in years, Lily truly believed that her happiness could last. And this time, she wasn't afraid.